Hi, everyone. I'm Len May. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Endocanna Health, and I'm here to ask and even possibly answer a question. Are precision therapeutics here? Well, before I do that, let me kind of establish something. The medical cannabis program is the main reason why we actually have legal or decriminalized cannabis, not only in the US and North America, but also, in a lot of places throughout the world. But if you take a look to see, and this is a slide about Canada, but North America in general is following the same trend. As we start seeing more and more adult use or recreational use states come on, we're seeing the spending kind of exponentially grow towards non-medical cannabis away from the therapeutic. And I'm going to try to interchange the word medical and therapeutic. And the reason for that is because the FDA recognizes medical as going through double-blind placebo studies. So I'm going to try to use that interchangeably with therapeutic, but basically having the same sort of the same thought around that nomenclature. So you can see that the spending exponentially has grown. But if we really dig through the numbers a little bit more, and we actually ask ourselves, are these really strictly medical or are they non-medical conditions? If you look at the surveys that have been done, you have, to help relax and feel more confident, to help sleep, to relieve feeling of anxiety, anxiousness. Are these therapeutic? Are these medical? Are these non-medical? These are questions that we're asking. Well, I want to dig a little bit deeper because in digging a little bit deeper, I can see that there are 71% of the responders to a study that talked about, looking at replacing over-the-counter medications using phytocannabinoids. Also looking at how this impacts your life. And if you look at this other slide, you can see that there's motivation for friendships or better social engagement or mental health, improving home life and marriage. The question is, medical still, therapeutic, non-medical? At the very least, I would say therapeutic. And if you see, there's a fun fact that Americans are spending more money on cannabis than they are on pizza, which should give you an indication of how much money is really being spent on cannabis, at least what's being accounted for. I'm sure it's a lot more with the gray and black markets. Once again, still trying to establish the fact of this whole nomenclature and this feeling of medical versus non-medical. If you see the top categories of where people are spending money, they're spending money on edibles. And out of all the edibles, gummies. Now, to establish this fact, again, we're talking about precision therapeutics, right? So we understand, my daughter consumes her vitamin D or vitamin C in a gummy. So you have multivitamins in gummies. Now, when you have isolated molecules in a gummy, it makes sense, whatever the bioavailability may be. But if you have the constituents of phytocannabinoids, you have cannabinoids, you have terpenes, you have flavonoids, all these different things that are presented to you, that's really not the absolute best modality to consume, because most of the edibles and especially the gummy products have an isolated molecule like THC or CBD, or two isolated molecules that's a distillate and an isolate of CBD and THC that are combined together, but it's not giving you the full constituents of the plant, and in no way are they actually aligned for precision therapeutics. So these are all the things that we're looking to address based on the pressures of governments, based on where the money flow is going, and based on what's available to the actual consumer. So if I'm going through and I'm looking at a little bit deeper on what's available to the consumer and what are people using for. So we have, for instance, Epidiolex, right? So Epidiolex is approved as the only FDA-approved cannabinoid, phytocannabinoid substance. And, out of the responders to this survey, 14 are using for seizures. But if you kind of look down, you see where people are focusing their efforts. They're focusing on pain and inflammation, something to address their condition of feeling of pain or inflammation or discomfort. Mental health, feeling better about themselves and their mental health, as well as uh, sleep. Sleep has been a huge one. So, once again, the question is it medicinal? Is it non medical? Is it therapeutic? It's a very, very difficult thing to do to find a truly therapeutic, precision therapeutic phytocannabinoid formulation for an individual that truly needs it, even for those specific conditions. As you go into a dispensary, it's all over the place. And being able to look at specifically, starting with somebody's predispositions to things and then guiding them to something that's more specific to them, and then having a feedback loop to be able to account for efficacy, that's really precision therapeutics. So the question still exists. Let's see. Now, going forward, the question is how can we transform lives, improve access to medicinal or therapeutic cannabis, and advance patient outcome? I love this quote by Voltaire. I've used it in many, many presentations, but the art of medicine consists in amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. Nature, we've already known this for hundreds of years. Yes, there's placebo, but we have these substances in nature. And you think about it this way, a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs that are being created came from substances in nature. And the way that we consume these substances, even drugs, they actually bind to receptors and release endogenous neurochemicals. So, that's what we're really looking for, to see what we can do to get some of that nature's healing power without creating an adverse event for an individual, so we can help address those symptomatic conditions and eventually, address the disease that may be the root cause of those. So this is really what I want to establish. And the reason why we are at the intersection where precision medicine really meets digital health, it became accelerated a lot more through COVID. We have become much more comfortable having a conversation with a healthcare provider the same way we're having a conversation now, online, through Zoom or through another type of medium, to be able to have a conversation with a healthcare professional. Now, the other thing is, through COVID, we feel that maybe the healthcare system wasn't prepared. Maybe there were some failures there. So looking at this in a positive way, we have been empowered a lot more to be able to have a collaborative experience with our healthcare professional. What I mean by that is we know a lot more about what's going on with some of our healthcare needs, and we can have a much more educated conversation with the provider or our physician to be able to say, how can we join forces together so we can both work on addressing my immediate healthcare concerns. Now, years ago, you go to a doctor, tells you, take 2 of these, call me in the morning. You don't really question those things. Now, we're questioning a lot more and getting more in depth about understanding our own predispositions to health. So, once again, the intersection where precision medicine meets digital health and where phytocannabinoids and also other therapeutics are aligned with your DNA. Your DNA is a starting point. That is your blueprint to understand where your predispositions are. And then also including biometrics and other biomarkers. What that leads to is hyper-personalization. And hyper-personalization not only means better outcomes, but one of the keys are to help minimize adverse events. When we met with the FDA, they said, what's the purpose of your test? And I didn't talk about what we do yet, but just to know what we communicate was to help people avoid an adverse event. And they were really supportive of that. From that, we go into what we call biocommerce. And biocommerce means personalized products that are created specifically for the individual or a category of individuals, basically people that are similar in that way, so maybe an archetype, and that creates a truly personalized experience. So still continuing trying to answer that question about precision therapeutics. Now, if we go into the definition of what is precision therapeutics and what is precision medicine, the emerging approach for disease treatment and prevention that takes into account individual variability in their genes, their environment, their lifestyle, and for each individual person. And we have our Endo Dna Test to be able to do that. Now, I'm going to go into a little more detail on that, but just so you understand that we have a test that we created that allows us to right now sequence about 675,000 different SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that are directly or indirectly associated with your endocannabinoid system. It's HIPAA and GDPR compliant, and the way that you would use that is a buccal swab, where you swab the inside of your mouth. You will register, and then you would mail the sample back to our lab. Another way is if you have raw data from the 23andMe, your Ancestry, any other DNA test, you can upload that data to My DNA Live, which I'll show you, and you'll get your report instantaneously. And I'll go into that a little more detail on how it works. But just to kind of establish what it is that we're talking about is, so right now we have our Endo Dna Test. And as I mentioned before, that looks at a person's endocannabinoid system and all the related pathways, so directly or indirectly. We're focusing on specific genetic traits that are associated with not only your endogenous endocannabinoid system, but also phytocannabinoid use. And as I said, to help prevent adverse effects or mitigate the adverse effects. The other thing is pharmacogenomics and pharmacokinetics. So the first thing is pharmacogenomics. What we look at is drug-to-drug interaction. Now, I had COVID, so I was taking 14 different supplements. Now, the question is, how do those supplements themselves interact together? Some of them are inducers, some of them are inhibitors, and how they interact with phytocannabinoids. These are all interesting questions to ask, and that's really the overview of how these things work together. So we have to guide people into that experience of interaction. The second thing is pharmacokinetics, and that talks about dosing. Now, we're always taught about, milligram per kilogram, etc. But if somebody's 250 pounds and somebody's 125 pounds, but one of them is a rapid metabolizer while the other person's a poor metabolizer, well, guess what? The poor metabolizer can consume, let's say, an edible. First pass, slower onset. You have an 11-oxyhydroxide conversion, slower onset, much more powerful onset experience with their phytocannabinoid use due to that conversion. But in addition to that, if they have predispositions to stress reactivity or slow rate of fear extinction and other anxiety-causing predispositions, now also things like psychosis or psychosomatic effects, somebody can be in for a pretty intense experience, and that's what we want to mitigate. And the third test that we just filed a patent for is our Neurodna Test. Now that has two separate sides to that. The first one looks at treatment-resistant depression. It looks at things like different binding affinity to pathways, serotonin, GABA, dopamine. But on the flip side of that, we're also looking at different psychotropic therapies like psilocybin, ketamine, LSD, MDMA, ibogaine, etc., and then seeing what the optimal therapeutic is for the individual, looking at possible adverse events that may be associated with that treatment protocol, as well as their genetic predispositions. So truly looking at a more precise way to be able to deliver a psychotropic therapeutic. So just to give everyone a little bit of an overview of how Endo Dna works, the test. The first thing you would do is you would log into your secure anonymized portal, which is a software called My DNA Live. On there, you would have your DNA results. You would have your health profile, which gives us a baseline. From there, we have your drug-to-drug interaction, and all those build your personalized wellness plans. Now, if you can take a look at this, and I know it's kind of small, but you can see that every single report gives you the definition of the symptomatic condition. Also gives you a summary of findings. And in the summary, it talks about that this person may be prone to higher rate of stress reactivity, which can actually cause an anxiety event. This is really important. And on the science side, we're looking at a gene or a single nucleotide polymorphism called fatty acid amide hydrolase. That produces an enzyme that breaks down anandamide. Really, really important to know, and I'll mention this in a second. You can also see that the report gives you your genotype, your gene, it gives you your RSAD. It actually is supported by a peer review reference. Every single report that we have has to have a peer review reference. We build a machine learning algorithm also that looks at different studies, pulls them in based on certain criteria, and now we have a science board that goes over those, makes sure that the right ones are being added. In addition to that, we're also involved in a bunch of different studies and clinical studies, and I'll share that in a little bit more. But this is a really interesting gene because it has a lot to do, and we're conducting a study right now, we're finding a pattern between the expression of that gene and also people that are talking about pain and discomfort and inflammation. And it makes sense because if you have a stressful event, all these neurochemicals are pumped into your bloodstream. You have dopamine, you have adrenaline, you have norepinephrine, you have cortisol. And, after some time, when your brain realizes no lion chase in the jungle, there's a reuptake of those neurochemicals. Now, one of the other things that happens, there's a release, a secretion of anandamide, which is our endogenous endocannabinoid. And when that happens, you're then getting back to homeostasis, which is the goal of the endocannabinoid system, balance. But if you are breaking down your anandamide faster than the average person, you're really not producing enough. Now that cortisol level stays longer, can reduce your pH level, make you more acidic. You can have an overactive immune response, which you'll feel as pain and inflammation, and then it can actually go into your gut health and create your gut health issues if you're predisposed to that. So there's definitely a correlation between those, and that's what we're finding out in our studies. Now, just to continue on really quickly, we also have a dosing part, which looks at metabolic function, as I mentioned, what type of metabolizer you are of certain cannabinoids, THC, CBD, or them together. We're also looking at drug interaction. So we have over 200 prescription medications that are looking at those specific drugs and seeing how they interact. And then from there, it creates your personalized wellness plan with the major indications of why people consume cannabis, and all the way down to product matching. The way product matching works is we use certificates of analysis, and we go through an algorithm to help match the percentage of that product's cannabinoids, terpenes, etc., to what your suggested ratio is, and also geofence to see how close that product is, or where you can find it closest to you where you reside. Now, we also have a physician view. The physician view is fully integrated into the electronic health record system. And in the electronic health record system, you can order the test just as you would of any other test, like blood work, urine, etc. And then it's fully integrated, so you can print as PDF, you can make notes, and all that is found on one screen. Now, that's where we are today. Where we're going tomorrow is full genome sequencing, whole genome. So when we do whole genome, what that means is it's personalized therapeutics, everything. You're looking at personalized nutrients, personalized vitamins, skin, anything else. It's truly a personalized therapeutic, and it's a huge game changer for us to be able to do that. In addition to doing whole genome sequencing, we're looking at polygenic risk scores. And polygenic risk scores are basically validated assays of hundreds of thousands of people that look at thousands of genetic markers, and we're able to create a predisposition allocation. So people that have this genetic predisposition are more likely to experience C-reactive protein levels that are higher related to inflammation, also major depressive disorder, also different diseases and different conditions. So as we move forward, that's another biomarker to create a more personalized therapeutic approach. The next part of that is how do we utilize that in real world applications. So sleep lab, and it's one of the studies that we're doing right now, and that's one of the things that we're implementing. So one of the ways that we're going to be using this or are using this in daily life is an individual would fill out a health profile. They would speak to their care counselor. Their care counselor would make sure they created the proper overview and completed their health profile correctly and see if they have a specific issue that they want to talk to a healthcare professional, a prescriber about. The healthcare professional will then order specific labs, including the DNA test. Once they get the results, they review the results and they provide them a personalized protocol. That personalized protocol is accompanied by a biometric device, which we call the EndoLink device, as you see here, and I wear that every day. You also have an app that allows us to see frictionless feedback. One of the major challenges with patient-reported outcome is when somebody starts feeling better, they actually stop responding to patient-reported outcome. But to be able to voluntarily and de-identified in a de-identified way to be able to get your biometric data frictionlessly allows us to really understand the efficacy of the protocol that's being suggested. So what you would see behind the scenes is we're not just measuring, think of it as sort of a Oura ring and a Fitbit in one. So we're looking at all these different biometrics and you're engaging with that. So you're empowered to see what's going on. How's this protocol working on my sleep? Not only am I sleeping better, longer, but what is the quality of sleep? What is my heart rate variability, etc. But also in the insights, you can see how you can compare to general population and in which percentile you fit based on those biometrics. But the interesting part about it is behind the scenes, what we're getting is we're getting genotype and phenotype information. We're also getting PPG data, which is important because it gives us raw PPG data to be able to analyze. So heart rate variability, oxygen levels. We can either measure, snoring capacity, arterial elasticity, etc., and also through remote monitoring. All that information is then goes into our machine learning, and the machine learning algorithms can create better predictive inferences. So it's truly an end-to-end solution where there's oversight and we can modify the protocol based on that information that comes through. It's really important because we use a lot of that in our clinical and observational studies. So these are some of the ones that we're involved with. Some of them have been completed and published, and I'll share those with you. But some of them are ongoing studies like the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which is done, anxiety, chronic pain, etc. So just to give you an indication, one of the studies that we have published recently, along with Credo Sciences, which is Dr. Ethan Russo as well, we're looking at cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And one of the things we were able to find that in our cohort, over 70% of the participants versus the controls had 4 different genotypes in common, which is a pretty significant ratio and number to have a predictive inference related to cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which definitely people are suffering from. So we have to be able to understand the root cause of that, and then being able to create a protocol that is more specific and precise, whether it is abstaining from cannabis, but understand the root cause of that and perhaps an interaction that is also involved. So you can read that study on PubMed. Now, the other study that we're involved with is with Stacy Gruber's team at Harvard Medical associated with McLean Hospital, and that is focusing on a sublingual delivery of cannabidiol, CBD, for anxiety. And remember, I talked about FOB, fatty acid amide hydrolase. Well, there's also AKT1, CNR1. There's a whole bunch of genes that are associated with an increased level of anxiety. And when we see that certain people, CBD, working as an agonist, that is more efficacious, but other people, it's less efficacious. So as soon as we start kind of creating those archetypes of people based on our genotypes, based on our biomarkers, we are getting a lot more precise. And that's really the goal. The goal is to get that precision therapeutics going forward, not only with anecdotal data, but real world data that we can measure. Now, that is what we do, and this is our goal. And our goal is to have the world's largest observational study. So the thousands and thousands of people that are coming to us. And I want to really, really emphasize this because people are concerned about data and their personal data. Yes, we're collecting data. Data is really important, but Len May's personal data is not important. It's thousands of people that have a certain genetic variants that have taken a certain protocol and have reported patient-reported outcomes that are efficacious. That is the true goal of creating the world's largest observational study. Now, we're still involved in clinical studies, and it's really important, but I want to emphasize that these are de-identified. They have a number, not a name associated with them. And it's really important to know that. Just for the geeks out there that want to know what technology we use, we're on Amazon's AWS. We're HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, so that information resides on a different bucket in AWS, your personal information along with your genetic information, and it's encrypted. So you can have that information come back, decrypt that, and read the results for you. And healthcare professionals, doctors, whoever's participating in this, this is truly an important tool because we really align with not only getting precision therapeutics, but really looking at avoiding those possible adverse experiences. So just to kind of introduce you to some of the team members, just so you know who's behind all this, me, some of the other people that are part of Endocanna Health, from athletes to people who have worked in corporate, and really looking at our scientists. Our scientific advisory board is spectacular. We don't have everybody on the slide, but just so everyone can understand and see that we are not just putting names and not just putting people's titles on a slide. We meet at the very least once a month with the entire advisory board, the scientific advisory board. We talk about specific subjects. We help each other with studies, and we participate in each other's studies. And there is a tremendous value of having some of the world's best scientific and medical minds participate with us, because that really, truly creates credibility in what we're doing. And finally, I'm answering the question. I hope I answered the question for each and every one of you, that precision therapeutics are here. And I was able to support that question with all the data that I was able to share with you. And hopefully all those questions will be answered. And if not, reach out and I'll be happy to answer those questions myself personally. And with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for listening, for providing me your attention. I know everybody's busy, and my email is on the slide, so feel free to reach out with any questions, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity. Thank you so much.